7th CALLERLAB convention in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Today's date is 4/12/2022, and this is the Reconnect Square Dance Music and You session. I'm Buddy Weaver, says I'm your name, and I will serve as your moderator for this session. Panelists today, Scott Bennett, the one and only Scott Bennett. Nice one for Scott Bennett.
Nice hand, everybody.
I'd like to lay a little bit of foundation work for you folks, because I'm a big believer in taking that big step backwards and understanding where we are and where we're going, and so that it's not just a matter of we're just going to do something just for the sake of doing it. There should be a purpose driven to it. And so, having said that, I'm going to kind of turn, and I did this in my earlier session, so Ken, you'll forgive me, but I like to use that analogy of bringing things back to the trades. And when we have trade work, we have people who step into your home, like your plumbers or your electricians. You could say they're apprentices, and there are journeymen, and there are masters. You would all agree that there are different levels to a trade, and I think that should be applied to square dance calling as well. I believe there are apprentice callers who would know just a very little bit of information. They've been calling for maybe a few months, maybe a year. They probably don't own their own Hilton audio product. They probably don't have a club they're calling for. They're just kind of finding their way around. Versus a journeyman caller who's been at it for 1 to maybe 3 or 5 years. He's got a club he's calling for, maybe a couple of clubs. He's got a unit he can call a whole dance. And of course we have somebody like a master caller who's been at it for many, many years and can know the ins and outs of it. And today's topic is really directed at the journeyman caller. Now, we may cover some items in here that you may step back and say, well, wait a minute, I've been calling for 5, 10 years and I didn't know that. That's cool. What we sometimes find is that when we start talking about a journeyman level of experience and we mention something, folks who don't understand or didn't know it sometimes will say, wait, I didn't know that, I reject it. I don't want you to reject it. I want you to not be embarrassed by something. I want you to be open-minded to it and say, okay, now we're going to take this and run with it, okay? And we're going to approach this music topic from 2 different perspectives, because obviously we're 2 different people. Scott has a much greater musical background than I do. My background in music is pretty much limited to how it affects dancing. And for me, rhythm ties into dancing, because at the end of the day, rhythm is what the people step to. In the absence of rhythm, there is no dance. You can have beautiful music, and we often, well, let me rephrase it, we have sometimes had pieces of music that come out that are beautiful listening pieces, and the dancers can't dance it. You might see that they kind of do this little shuffle step, or they're kind of strolling along. A buddy of mine will call them Charlie Chaplin dancers. They're kind of, they don't know where to step because there's nothing provided for them to step to. The fundamental thing that we step to is that downbeat in square dancing. It's that 1, 2, 3, 4. The structure of everything that we have is based on that 4/4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4. And your 1, 2, 3, 4 as a working example. Let me turn this down. I don't want to blast you out. Am I blasting you out here in the front, Darren? No. Perfect. I can get louder then. All right, here we go. No. This is your fundamental. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody can feel that, correct? You can tap your hand on the table. You can clap your hands to it. Most dancers would start stepping to this 1, 2, 3, 4. Along with the idea of rhythm comes the idea of tempo. And tempo is the speed at which that rhythm is played. And this is where we often don't pay attention as callers, is to tempo. We take a piece of music, and maybe we take a piece of music that's produced by a square dance music producer, or we pick it up off of the internet, or we pick it up off of somebody who's handed us a stick. Shame, shame, shame on you if you're doing that. But we pick it up, we play it, and we don't pay any attention to what the tempo is doing to the dancers. And see, tempo is a big deal, because the faster the tempo, or the slower the tempo. So for example, this is the same piece of music, and you say, well, this is 4/4. I got the beat. Go ahead, tap your hand to that now. How long can you tap your hand to that before you fall off the beat? And so what we see is dancers who are dancing, and the caller is playing this completely oblivious of tempo, and the music's going too fast. They'll start to do this. Rather than doing this, they'll start to take a step on every other beat. And you have seen sometimes the dancers who will be out there, it looks like they're just strolling through a square, lackadaisical walking. It's not because they don't know how to dance, it's because probably the caller's playing that music too fast. Too fast. And the same thing can happen if you play it too slow, if you go from one extreme to another. It makes it very difficult for anybody. Oh, darn, it doesn't want to respond. There we go. You say, well, my group is older. I need to slow the music down for them. It's kind of like playing to the weakest player on your team. And when you do that, you're not really doing the group a favor, because then you're bringing everybody down to the slowest player on the team, rather than bringing the slowest player up to a middle ground. Tempo is just as important as rhythm is. If you have to, when you pull your piece of music up, and how many of you, by show of hands, are using software, computer, to play your music? Anybody here still using records, vinyl records? Same thing applies. If you, and I was a record caller for many years, you drop the needle on the record and you leave the stroke at 45. It's often too fast. And especially as we'll kind of get into it, if it came off of vinyl, and before we're done, we're going to be talking about, I'll be talking about vinyl. You talk about vinyl too?
Oh, no.
No. Do you have any new vinyl? What's your newest record, by the way? Scott's newest record on 78 RPM. It's an old country song called "How Can I Miss You If You Won't Leave?" And
remember the flip side.
What's the flip side? On the microphone, please.
I can't tell.
You can't tell on the microphone. You big chicken. So the 4-4, the step, 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 step. Now, by contrast, and I'm going to keep it very simple because I'm a simple kind of guy. I think very simple thoughts. And if you're dancing to the dancers and you're playing this 4-4, let's go back and play this 4-4 all over again, okay? Nice, simple. This is a little fast, in my opinion. It should be down, about there. It's about 126 beats per minute. That's a nice steady. You can step to that easily. But now I want you to imagine that that's all you're going to dance to for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to say, well, okay, now we're going to do the singing call. So here we go. Now we've got 3 minutes and 40 seconds of that. Okay, take a break, everybody. Have a round dance. Now come back, next tip. Here we go. Square them up. You get the feeling that I'm a one-trick pony after a while. And we often fall into that because we are creatures of, I don't want to say habit, but we're creatures who follow fads. Fads are nothing new in music, and certainly nothing new in square dance music. You can look back historically, and you can go back to the 1940s, and everything that was on 78 RPM, most of it was set in 6/8 rhythm time. And then it became the fad to go to this 4/4 rhythm right around the 1950s and into the 50s, again 78 RPM. The use of what we would call the 2/4, the bone chuck, didn't come along until the 1960s. What's the significant difference between this and the other piece of music I played? Anybody? The upbeat. It's a snare. It's a snare. And when you hit that snare, snare, snare. So you have the difference between a 1, 2, 3, 4 versus a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That snare adds a little bit more of a motion that wants to make the people pick their foot up. And so if you're doing a dance, as I like to do a dance, I'm not going to do this every single tip any more than I would do this every single tip. Because the dancers want variety. And by giving them that variety, which we all have. I mean, how many of you folks have more than 10 pieces of singing, more than 10 singing calls on your hoedown, on singing calls on your computer right now? More than 20? More than 50? More than 100? You need to dump it. You've got too much. You've got too much.
It gets heavier.
That's right. All that music, especially the bad music, makes it's a burden to carry around. You didn't know how good it's going to be to work with me,
No,
did you?
I-
Oh, yeah.
How long has it been since we worked together?
It's been a long time, brother. Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too much, but I'll go down the rabbit hole a little bit. We were doing a weekend, and this caller who shall remain nameless, he said, oh, pick out the next song for the next tip. So he put his computer out there and said, we went to, let's see, 1,000 titles. Oh, here we go. Let's take that one first choice, maybe that one second choice. So he came up, he said, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to do that one first choice. He said, no, I don't do that one. Oh, let's go down second choice. So I don't do that one. Your computer versus the same guys who'll sit there and have you see this, and if it's you don't have to respond. But the dancers have just finished a great hoedown. They're just applauding like crazy. They had a great time. Let me get the singing call ready now.
Yeah. No, not that one.
Okay. Nothing tires people more than standing.
Waiting.
Yeah, that's right. When people stand, like for a long announcements,
Yeah.
or while they're waiting for you to find your next record or your next piece of music on your computer, they are suddenly very much aware of how tired they are. And so if you're on a record, like we used to be in records, right?
Yep.
We had the hoedown laid out here and the singing call laid down right over there. And if I really didn't like you, I'd come along and I'd turn all your singing calls around in your sleeve. And if I didn't like him, I'd unplug his computer and hide it. The idea here is that we want to keep things moving along in a way. And so the idea here too is that we want to give you variety. I'm going to stop because you've been sitting here waiting. I want to turn this over to Scott, so why don't you take it?
Well, all right. Nice everybody so far. He didn't do anything too wacko. So perhaps my presentation will be a little more on a music technical kind of way of looking at things. Some of the topics we're going to look at is measure and bar, a little bit about meter, a little bit about tempo. I'm going to try to keep those in fairly simple terms. I don't expect everybody to become a musician when you walk out of the joint. You know what I mean? That's not really our goal. Okay? But to give you an idea of how things work. So when I think about a measure or a bar, I'm thinking about the way I divided the music. I subdivided the music into phrases, for the simplest way of saying that. And we denote that in sheet music with bar lines. It's called a measure, but they got nicknamed a bar because we put a little bar line in. That's just one little section, one little piece of that whole composition. Meter, there's a lot of different ways of thinking about meter, but we're going to lead into that kind of slowly. A division of that measurement or bar, we're taking the tune and we're cutting it up into pieces to write it in a way that everybody can understand. A musician knows where to play and knows what to do. That's the simplest answer to that. The organization of the music and beats, grouped, and specific rhythm. I highlighted a couple of words there because that's kind of what this is headed to. This is going to head to something called time signature. So as we're looking at this, organization of music and time, that's the rhythm that he was talking about. If I said it was a 2/4 or a 4/4 or a 6/8, we're talking about how the music, the beats are actually aligned in time. If all I gave you was a kick drum, a bass drum, if you're not familiar with kick drum, and that's all I gave you, bang, 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 you wouldn't know if it was 4, you wouldn't know if it was in 2, you wouldn't know if it was 6/8, there'd be no way to tell. We have to put accents in there that subdivide that into a time signature. And that's kind of the way I like to look at it. So anyway, beat, we have what we call a downbeat. Buddy mentioned downbeat. That's the significant beat. That's the one that you notice the most. If you were talking about 4/4 time, I'm going to show you a little kind of example of that with a little video. But it's the first beat's the strongest beat. And then you have 3 weaker beats. 2/4 time, you only have 2 beats. You have 1 is very strong and 2 weaker. Boom, jump. Moving right along, the upbeat would be those beats after, the weaker beats after. Well, in square dancing, the problem is we have to step on all 4 of those in a 4/4 time. You have to step on every single beat. Well, if the beats in a 4/4, if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, well, if I just accent 1, they don't feel 2, 3, and 4. So we have to do something to make that feel like something that they recognize. There's some tricks that we do. So anyway, this video, for whatever reason, won't play beat 1 first. 1. So that'd be an example, very slow, 4/4 time. So you had the downbeat, that was number 1, and the rest of them were the weaker beats, which would be upbeats, so to speak. And then time signature, as I talked about 2/4 time, I'm going to give you a little example of 2/4 time. 1. So you have boom, chuck, so to speak. So boom, chuck, Bible engineer, he calls that boom, chick. And I said, I always heard that it was boom, chuck. And he said, well, it's like boom, chick-a-boom, chick-a-boom. The boom, chick is just the first 2, the boom, chick-a-boom kind of thing. So I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you. You've been doing this your whole life. So I played this on my keyboard. It's a very simple 2/4 rhythm. Can you hear the difference in the up and the down? Everybody got that one pretty easy? No problem. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little example of a tune that we might use in square dancing that has that exact same beat to it. The exact same beat. You can find it. I can absolutely hear that in there. So the first little piece is going to be where you can hear the difference in the drums, and then the next piece would be where it's all mixed together. Does that make sense? A little bit? All right. So I like to call this particular 2/4 rhythm the train rhythm. So not only do I have boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck going on, I also got a chicka 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 chicka. I can't do them both at the same time. So I had to play it on my keyboard. So here it goes. I'm afraid they're going to be louder. Can you hear what I'm talking about? You got your regular boom chuck, but you also got chicka chicka chicka. Now these things drive people forward to be a boom chuck, 2/4 type rhythm. There's no question. If you want people to square dance and actually dance on time, boom chuck's going to get them there. Whether it's just a straight 2/4 or if it's got like the train rhythm. Either way, they're going to propel. They're going to move. Something's telling them to pick up their foot and someone's telling them to put their foot down. All right. So moving right along, here's a square dance version. Listen, you're in a train in it. Exactly the same thing you just heard with just the drums. Makes sense? So far, so good, buddy?
Doing well.
4/4 time. 4/4 times the oddity. 4/4 times the oddity because there's so many different kinds of 4s. I mean, there's so many kinds of 4s. You could swing. You could shuffle. You could straight rock rhythm. You could your walking bass. There's so many different versions of that. Some of the ballads that we do in 4/4 don't have much down in them at all. You don't feel the pulse as well. So I'm going to give you a basic idea with my little video here. It'll skip beat 1. It'll come back. You get that? All right. Slow down, buddy. So this would be what I would call straight 4. It's going to go kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. And it's going to be very, very similar. I got a drummer right here in front. I mean, it's very similar feel to 2/4. It's kind of similar feeling to 2/4. But we have to subdivide it differently because of the way that it moves. So here we go. Hear the difference in the drive? I bet we can't clap to the right beats. It's a joke. The start of my joke got a laugh because I mentioned Buddy. So anyway, it's very difficult for people to clap. They don't know what beat to clap on. But it's in one of the rhythms I'm going to show you in a minute. It's very, very clear what to clap on. But really, you're supposed to not clap on the downbeats. You're supposed to clap on the upbeats. And about 900% of the time, if I say, all right, everybody clap your hands, they'll be clapping on the wrong beats. And I go, that's interesting. So anyway, back to my straight here for just a second. This would be an example of a song that had that exact same straight eighth note on a hi-hat, same drum. So that's pretty common. If you don't accent beats 2 and 4 strong enough, dancers sometimes don't feel those. They can feel the kick drum, but they don't really necessarily feel it. They hear the snare, but they don't feel it. They don't feel the snare. So you have to be careful with 4/4 times. You have to make sure that they dance. This is swing or shuffle. Swings. I like to look at that as the difference between running and skipping. It kind of skips, it swings. It's counted in triplets, you know, but it's, you're here. There's a swing. I played that on the keyboard. You feel it kind of makes you want to kind of sway around a little bit. But that's still a 4/4. But that has a very different feel to the dancers. I like swings and shuffles. I put on a swing or a shuffle, and I watch the people out on the floor, especially the ladies I notice. They'll start grooving almost right away. That tells me the music's affecting them physically. It's going to affect how they dance. All right, moving right along. There's an example of the exact same rhythm mixed in the track. You can pick it out, feel it swinging. It's a shuffle. You can even hear the hi-hat. All right, I like the way y'all are thinking. This is probably, I'm waiting for the argument to come in. Okay. It is the 4 on the floor. I would say the majority of the music out there today that we're getting, that people are really thinking are 2/4 rhythms, are actually 4 on the floor, where we're kicking the bass drum, right, on all 4 beats. And then we're accenting it however we want to accent it. And this disco music, 4 on the floor came around in disco. Whether you like disco or not, you can't argue that the beat from disco square dance is really, really well. It was music designed for people to dance. Well, I sold you on that. That was easy. So this would be, I just added some hi-hat accents, but listen to kick drum, all 4 beats. Boom. The hi-hat makes it feel different. Alrighty then, I like it. Without the accents, it could have been 2/4. It could have been 4/4. It could have been anything. But because of the accents, you could feel that it was in 4. Alright, I like that. I don't have a lot of examples for this one. This is a pretty new song that somebody just released, not me, somebody else. Feel it. Feel the boom. Boom. That's 4 on the floor. Same thing as we did in disco. I love it. Moving on. I'm not going to spend much time here. Ballad rhythm, I'll give you a little example of that. That's about all I'm going to do. It's very lazy. A lot of times no kick drum to speak of. Sometimes only a kick drum on beat 3. Why? I don't know. It's your job to tell me. But it's very lazy feeling. It would not be the best probably for square dancing. If you have a song that has this ballady kind of rhythm, there's nothing wrong with it. You could do that maybe once in a night. you know, but you better sing the you know what out of it, you know, to sell it to the crowd, because it won't dance so well. I'll use one of my songs as an example here. Yeah, maybe a little bit. And I'm using my song as a bad example, not as a good example. So if you listen, you'll find that same basic idea. Get it to play. Here's doing a side step. It's a pretty song, but there's not much to propel the people to moving forward. When we get to the chorus, though, we get a more straight rhythm that's kind of driving them a little bit. So once again, you can get by with that a little bit. Why am I telling you all this? When you're listening to your music and you're making those choices of what songs that you're going to perform, that you're going to do, if you're going to do like what Buddy was talking about, which he's absolutely telling you the right thing, why would you want every single rhythm to be exactly the same all night long? If you don't know the difference in the rhythms, you can't hear it or feel it, well, they probably can. So you have to learn how to do that so that you can change it up. I'm almost done. 6/8, there's been a little bit of music done in 6/8 time. I'm not going to spend much time here. And the video is really strange that I made. I don't know why I did it. Here it goes. Here comes the 1. And then we get another beat on. So it's like counted like, stop, thank you. It's kind of counted like, you could do it a couple different ways. You know, you could do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or you, if you're real musical, you could do, you know, 1 and a 2 and like that. Anyway, this would be an example of like a jig kind of thing. This is a real popular style of rhythm in jazz music. You can count this in 2s. It's actually a duple. It's 2 groups of 3. There you go. And this is about the best example that I've ever found for a 6/8 song. It's quartet as well. It's pretty fast, so you have to be able to count it. Get ready for the 1, it's coming. 1, 2, 3. You feel it kind of swings you back and forth, like a pendulum. That's the feel of 6/8. This is a little bit of a repeat of what Buddy was talking about, but if you were looking at, I'm almost done. Are we on time? Okay. Buddy was talking about tempo. Tempo is very, very important. The speed of the music, based on the style of rhythm, might not sound exactly the same. 130 beats would be really, really fast in one rhythm, but might be close to okay in another. Same thing the other direction, 124 beats. But we used to dance to what, 132 to 136?
In the 70s, about 132.
Yeah, about 132, we were all afraid. So anyway.
That's when the dancers were young.
We were too, weren't we?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, the accents, I've already mentioned that, I don't want to spend any real time on that. But if you listen to this piece, I'm giving you an example of a different, same rhythm idea, same tempo, which is slightly different rhythms. And think about how fast or slow this feels. Same rhythm, different accents, same tempo. Does one feel like it's driving you forward and the other one made you kind of feel same tempo? Both weren't 4s, 4/4 time. But this one has more drive in it and the other one didn't. It was more like a ballad rhythm. So even if the rhythms that you're doing are what you want, sometimes maybe the tempo will feel a little odd. So you have to make sure, as Buddy was saying, that you manage your tempo and you manage your meter. You put all those time signatures and you think about that, how it feels. He mentioned tapping, there he was tapping on his water jet. Are you tapping on all four? Or are you kind of lazily tapping off one and on the other? So I'm gonna play this little sample here and then you tell me what rhythm it is. Ready? Go. Oh. So first thing, is it in 2/4 or 4? It's more of a 4. Is it straight or is it shuffling? Little shuffle, light shuffle. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Buddy Weaver.
He has a great selection of rhythms in here, and I want to point out one more thing here. So we talked about how the dance rhythm affects the way people dance. It also affects the way you call. It affects it a great deal. So for example, that's why when you're playing at 6/8, and I got a 6/8 here, dee-da-da-da. Do you mind plugging me in here on the top here, please?
plug me in
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I wonder if I had it over here.
Here we go.
Good. Down. Nice piece of 6/8. I call it 6/8. Makes the dancers dance a whole lot differently, but it also makes you call differently. Because if my usual style of calling is, well, out on the left with your go left hand, and here you go with the right and left grand. Now try to set that same kind of out on the left with your go left hand, out on the left with your go left hand, and here you go with the right and left. It doesn't sound right. The rhythm is kicking me in the back, saying you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And so it forces you, as a performer, we are performers, out on the left, your old left hand, here we go, right and left grand, right and left around the ring, up, up, up. It forces me to call in a different way. And the dancers pick up that, oh, it sounds different, it feels different. This 6/8 style of music is what I strongly advocate for anybody who's trying to learn how to call in a different rhythm. Start with this. Start with the 6/8. Start with the most difficult and work your way backwards. And I'll give you another example of a rhythm that's very similar. It's more of a 4/4. Let's see. Here. I love this. I love this for hoedown. Singing call. How's your powder calling to this? Right. You're not going to call it Allen and left, grand, right, left, hand over hand, well, head square through. No, you might call it. Here's that was my stuff. Bennett in person. But I'm going to call it, well, ahead you move it up and move it back, and then you pass the ocean, then extend, swing, Allen left your corner. You see it's not, it's a ladies back. Allen left. Allen left. The way we roll on the syllables is different. Allen left your corner, right and left grand. And it's not heads go forward up to the middle and come on back. It might be heads, so move it up and move it back. Move it up and move, you feel that. You feel it. Now, as you're calling it that way, the dancers are dancing it that way. They're doing this thing. They're dancing back and forth. They're doing a little jig step all the way through. That's El Paso City. But that is a great way to learn how to call to a different rhythm, is pick something that's a 6/8 rhythm and start there. And then work your way in. Because the 2/4s and the 4/4s and everything we've been discussing here, there's a different style. There's similarities. You can command it. I tend to be more of a commander with 4/4 rhythm. I tend to be more of a past the ocean, extend, swing through. And then you give me a nice 2/4, I might be more of a past the ocean, then extend, a little more sing-songy, I'm more of the old school caller, because I'm kind of old school. I'm OG. You know what OG means?
I'm listening.
Oh, never mind. That's for a different topic. Mixing in the rhythms too, and this is another thing that we sometimes can get into, is to be able to mix a rhythm. Like, so we could start with something like a shuffle rhythm. It's a swing rhythm here. And this is nothing new. I wish I could take credit for the idea of changing rhythm around. Nice, isn't it? Smooth. It's a lackadaisical rhythm.
But I'm swinging.
You're swinging, right?
A little
Let
bit.
me sing again. Walk around your corner, see some very laid back. Your bass. And then we're going to kind of pep it up a little bit. Right. That's right, bone chucking, because here comes the snare. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2, and just making the people jump up and down, and you really get to mess with them a little bit. My finger's not warm enough. Hang on. Still doesn't work. Come on back here. That jumps right back to it, right there in the middle. And so you get a chance to move the people around. They're going fast, they're going slow, they don't know what to think of it, and then you charge them at the end with a big key change and they're ready to go. I was going to talk just for a couple of minutes on records. Are you okay with that?
Whatever you like.
Vinyl records. I used to be a producer of vinyl records back in 1826.
I
Sorry.
recorded one for you in
You did.
1837.
You recorded for me on many vinyl records. I still have quite a few of them. And
You're all
shit
there.
red on you, brother.
The way you used to love it.
He's gonna. Yeah, I know. He's gonna. I'm gonna be brought up on ethics charges right after this. He harassed me at that session. You know, vinyl records to me is a genre unto itself. And let me talk about genre for a second, because every caller on their computer has their own way of placing everything in order. They might place it by title. I place my music by rhythm. Number one is rhythm, 2/4 or 4/4. And the second thing I place it by is by the orchestration. Is it contemporary? Is it a modern feel? Or is it Western, country type of a feel? Because each has its own following. And people, we have a little running joke at home. The people say, well, we know you don't like country. I said, I really don't like country. The last time a good country song was released was George Jones and Tammy Wynette, I think. Everything else after that is, well, you know, to each his own. There's been, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, there are some good stuff out there. And in the same type of filing system as I have for 2/4, 4/4, country or contemporary, there at the very bottom are the numbers designating it came off of a vinyl record. Okay? Because I'm going to give you a brief history of vinyl music. Tom is here, Monk's here, you're going to tell me, yep, absolutely right. When we produced vinyl records, we took, many of it came off of an analog tape. There was nothing done on digital in the early days. Am I right? Analog tape degraded over time, but analog tape meant that we very seldom mic'd an individual instrument. We often mic'd a room. And when it came from analog, it went to be cut on a lacquer. And the lacquers were cut. And from that, if you were willing to throw the money at it, you made a father, which made a mother, which made a stamper, which made the vinyl record. And if you were tight on the budget, you went from a vinyl to a mother maybe, and then a stamper. And if you were really broke, you went from the lacquer to a stamper. And that was it. And with those vinyl records, everything was produced to play on an old Hilton turntable, which ran 89T type needles on it. 89T needles were thick, they were wide, they were done on purpose, because that way if you dropped it, it wouldn't constantly chip on you, and you'd have to be changing out a needle every single time. The problem with a wide needle is you need a wide groove. And the wider the groove, the lower the fidelity. You lose the beautiful highs and you lose those beautiful lows. You get stuck with everything smack dab in the middle. When I left, it was Rocky Mountain Record Producing. You remember Rocky Mountain up there in Cheyenne? And they went out of business. And I said, by gosh, I talked to my buddy up in LA. He says, I got Universal. The Universal had a pressing plant up in upstate New York. I said, beautiful, we're going up there. And I took it to my guy in LA, and he cut my beautiful lacquers. And they were just beautiful, just sounded awesome. And we sent it out. And I think about 4 months later, I get a call from Pam Dillander. She says, I'm getting your records returned. I said, why? She says, the callers are saying it's skipping. And sure enough, if you used the old 80-90 needles, you set that needle on that record and go, because the grooves were too fine, because it was a beautiful, beautiful cut. It had beautiful highs and beautiful lows, and for square dancing, it was 0 sales. So I had to buy them all back, and we had to go and press a whole bunch of crappy records, because we had to go and get rid of all those beautiful highs and those beautiful lows. And so now, if I sit there and said to myself, knowing what I know, would I want to take that record and put that onto my computer when I have a choice of getting something that's done digitally, that has beautiful sound to it? You would have to be the judge for yourself. But for me, I don't like to bring a lot of... Somebody, we sat in one of those producer sessions, remember that, a few years back? Some fellow, poor guy, he had no idea what he was asking. And he said, I've got this huge box of records, what should I do with it? And somebody looked at it and said, well, why don't you ask Buddy Weaver, right? And I said, I think when the next time you have a flat tire, you should use it to prop your car up. Jack it up and put that big box of records up underneath it. That'll hold that car up beautifully. But other than that, I would not really put a vinyl record on. Now, if you're doing a vinyl record, and I know everybody here has, I know you all have done it. You've all taken your vinyl record, you said, I spent all this time in cleaning it up, and it sounds just perfect. I'm here to tell you, as I say it, you may not be correct. Because when you are taking a scratched up record, and if it was a scratched up record, and most records were scratched up, you're taking something that was scratched, and you're saying, well, I'm going to run it through some software. Well, when you run it through software, the software can't tell the difference between a scratch or a click track.
Right.
And we use click tracks. And a good example was something like we did Ghost Riders in the Sky. We had the reason why we put a click track in our music is because the click track cuts the rhythm to the back of the hall. And sometimes when you play a piece of music and it seems like if you've got 2 squares in the front, they're enjoying it, but when you get another row back or another row back, and they're not with the rhythm anymore. There's a reason for it. They didn't produce it with a click track. The click track is what cuts. Sometimes you get it from detuning a guitar on so you can send that rhythm to the back of the hall. And so when you take your software and it can't tell the difference between what should be there versus because you got a nick in your record. Software doesn't know the difference. You can't train it to know the difference. And so when you take it out of, when you use software, you're going to have an imperfect product. Understand that, accept it. You don't have to fight it. Practice radical acceptance. I accept what it is. I accept what it is, and that's what it is. Having said that, and to bring to close what I want to say about the records, is we have in many opportunities, at least in my opportunity, where we still have the studio masters. So we can bake them, and all of the old tapes have to be baked, literally baked. In other ways, because the adhesive is dried up, and it suffers from, help me, sticky shed syndrome. It's hard to say that 3 times fast.
Magnetic delamination.
Magnetic delamination, which means that if you don't bake your tape and you play it through the tape player, it falls apart in a beautiful little pile of plastic. And there was your tape. That's all that's left of maybe something was for 30 years ago. So we can do that. Some producers have their tapes. They can bake it, and they can come up with an MP3 which is going to be absolutely beautiful. Buy that if you had a chance to do that rather than converting your old records. If you want to use your old records, it's a genre. It fits in the program. I take 1 tip in a night, and I'm going to use nothing but something from a vinyl record because it's nothing different than another genre. and it has its place, and it feels, well, it feels different. It just feels kind of old twang. Oh, I need to plug this back in, would you? I just want to make sure I'm down to 0 here. I'm just going to give you a working example. It's not the one I want to come on now. Play. It's got a feel. It's got a unique sound. That thing was probably produced in 1962, maybe even earlier. And it's okay. I mean, it makes for a nice tip every now and then if you want to play that. But if I want to play something that's a little bit more contemporary, I'd probably go with something more like this. You can suddenly feel the beat. This is a modern piece, 2/4, produced here within the last few years. Each has its place. Knowing where it fits into your program is what I would highly recommend. And if the takeaway, I think the goal setting, as we talked about, you know, if you're coming in as a journeyman, if you're coming in as an apprentice, a goal setting is to listen to your music, try to understand it better. Don't call when you're listening. Just let the music play. Maybe you might want to try dancing to your music. If you want to call to it and then try to dance to it. You might want to listen to how other callers use that same piece of music, because then you can hear how they may be adapting it to their thing. Scott is a terrific vocalist. He does singing calls that I can't touch, because he can belt it out and he grabs the people and they're dancing right with him. I can't do it. It would require me to work so hard. I would age 10 years in one tip, and I don't have that many years left, so I can't do that. And like you said, some of those songs, you're going to have to carry it. You're going to belt it out and carry it. But understand that that's what you're going to do. You're on.
I think Buddy made some really great points. Know your music, choose up the music that you're doing. The one thing that I will add to his vinyl example, the items that I took off of vinyl and brought into my computer, no matter how good the needle is that you're using now, it lived through some bad treatment and some old fat needles, those 89Ts.
It's had some bad relationships.
Yeah, it's not been a happy life. So the quality of the music, a lot of times the needle rode too high because it couldn't get sharp enough to get all the way down into the groove. So it couldn't get all of the sound. That was one of the limitations. Hilton finally came along with a needle that 0.7 mil diamond style needle that could get a little more advantage of that more full sound. So if you had one that was not able to play all the way in and you used it for very long, every time that needle's turning around in that groove, it's heating that groove up to like 1,000 degrees. And everything that is in its atmosphere is now included. And the sound of that never changes. When a caller tells me, they say, oh, I got all my stuff on computer now. I always go, oh, yeah? And I listen to them call. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's the same static, same click, same low level,
Drop the needle.
you know, that type of thing. You know, so let's be professional. Let's make the quality of our sound. Take a lot of pride in your product. And that was kind of my follow-up to that. Some callers could literally call to a typewriter because the music's just in the background. They're not interacting with the music. When Buddy gave the example of his calling style changes as the rhythms change, as the feel of the music changes. You shouldn't be calling exactly the same way to every single piece. If it moves you differently, and it moves them differently, you should call differently. And that would be the thing I would urge you to do. Listen to your music, learn it. Don't let it just be a background piece. You could use a typewriter, it really doesn't matter.
To add on to what you're saying too, and to tie in what I said earlier about the whole trades analogy, you know, if your guy came in to do your electrical work and he's carrying a whole bunch of rusty tools, but he did a decent job, you might not fault him too much. But you might be more impressed if he carried in a toolbox that has some good stuff, sharp tools, sharp knives. He wasn't there, you know, trying to saw through something where he could have just cut right through it. And it's the same way with our music. It's a tool. It's a toolbox. If you don't mind, the whole laptop is a toolbox, and it's the tools we carry. How sharp is your tools? How professional does your toolbox make you look and sound? Would that be a fair statement?
I like it.
Do you have any we're open for questions. We have a little bit of time remaining. Questions? A whole bunch. Hang on, we're going to bring the mic out. Please direct your questions to Scott Bennett.
I was just,
Hold your own microphone. You think I'm your caddy?
yeah, I was just wondering, software, do you use CALLERLAB to,
Name, where you from?
Drew Scares from Arlington, Virginia. Software, I use CALLERLAB to convert my vinyls to MP3s, yeah. Do you have any suggestion other than that? I bought a program from a fellow in California called Click It, which takes out a lot of the
Clicks.
stuff in it, you know, so.
If there's no other way to get the music, I understand the desire to use it that way. Every time you use a software program to bring down those clicks, you lose other things with it. It's just, there's no way to magically just take out the click. It has to lower the volume level of that particular little bit and bring it down. And you're gonna lose some quality. There's no way to get around it. If it's available some other way, I highly recommend you get it another way.
I know you call it the old days.
Name.
Mike Sikorsky.
Thank you.
Hi, where are you from?
I forgot. Apache Junction, Arizona. Okay, so one thing we used to have to do, because I've been recording since 1980, what we had to do is if it went to vinyl, you had to undermix the kick drum and the bass. Two very important things to the rhythm they are talking about today. So if you're coming off of vinyl, you've already lost it. We had to undermix it because no matter how good that needle was, it would pop out of the groove. And we had that happen on a couple of we used to do things called test presses. And they were good for 40 or 50 plays. And if it didn't work on a test press, it wasn't going to work on the final. You got to go back in and remix. So you've already lost a lot just by coming from a vinyl record back to the computer.
I agree.
So, hey, Mike, what did we do back in those days when the needle would skip on a record?
Well,
Put a nickel on it?
Yeah.
he put a nickel, I had a quarter, I had a quarter.
Well, yeah, I could afford the quarter, so I actually put a quarter. I had a silver dollar on mine at one point, but you know, all it did was just grind that. I mean, it's like taking a Buick and
You talk
driving
about
it down and down.
1,000 degrees, talk about 1,000 degrees in that groove, you just decrease it to 5,000 degrees in there.
I could afford the 5,000.
And when it goes back through again, you know, all these old records that all have all this scratching, the damage is created when you reset that record and play through that groove without allowing it to cool. And I mean, it takes, what, 30 minutes, 45 minutes for the groove to cool enough to where you're not going to create the damage. Yep. I understand sometimes you got to go from vinyl to record because you can't get it any other way, but for the vast majority of stuff, don't do it, buy it fresh digital.
Mike makes some great points. One thing I'll add to what he was saying, in the environment in square dancing back when records were the only thing that we used, a lot of halls, people smoked. And they smoked in the hall. And as that groove was opening up and accepting everything around its atmosphere, it was also taking in dust and dirt and smoke and everything else into that groove. And it changes its tonality. It changes the way it sounds. Records sound different every time you play them.
Questions?
We like questions.
Who's got a question? We got 7 minutes left. I want to put a quick pitch in for Scott Bennett because he not only produces beautiful speakers for the Accent, but he also produces beautiful music on his 3 labels. and it does have a wide variety of rhythms, almost as good as Blue Star, but better than Blue Star. So I'll put a quick pitch in. How about a nice hand for Scott Bennett?
Big hand to Buddy Weaver.
It's entertaining, isn't it? We invite your questions. If you think of something when you walk out of here, send all of your email questions to Scott, and and you'll be sure to get right on it. Oh, you have we have a question. Okay, a comment. Oh, well, hang on.
I'll make a comment. John Harden, Caledonia, Illinois. I learned the hard way from having to record something off of vinyl because I couldn't find it anywhere else. When you record it, you're going to record it a half a dozen times before you get something you're happy with. Set it aside for 2 weeks, come back and play it again because it will not sound as good as it did after you recorded it a half a dozen times and got it to where you thought it sounded good. Before you take it to a dance. I did that the hard way because I recorded something, said, okay, I got it ready, I got it put aside. Didn't touch it again until I played it at a dance and said, oh my Lord, that's horrible sounding. It's all high pitchy and yeah. To replay it before you play it for your dance.
It's not a bad plan.
If we got a minute, Mike Meacham, Denver, outside Denver, Colorado. What do you think of those pieces of software that normalize your music so they all are the same? They're supposedly all the same volume.
They don't work.
Volume is more about apparent volume in my mind than it is the actual wave file, how much it fills the screen, so to speak. So visually, two files could look exactly the same, height, dynamic. And however, one song, if it was mostly high frequency things, lots of flutes and pretty little things that are way up on top, it'll sound a lot louder to the ear than things that are down on the bottom. So one mix might sound a little different than another mix. Normalizing just tries to squash everything into a similar volume based on the dynamic decibel level of the music. That's
The
the best
musician will tell you just took away their music dynamics.
You took some of it away for
Wrote
sure.
it for those music dynamics.
Right, I mean, because obviously, starting a piece of music with the guitar is going to sound a lot different than starting a piece of music with sax or screaming fiddle. I think there were some oldies out there that started with screaming fiddle, and so even when you had the volume down, it was going to be too shrill no matter what. You almost had to zero your volume. And to answer your question in the longer picture, I get in the habit of just zeroing out. I just turn the volume down after I finish my patter and turn it back up for the singing call. Finish the singing call, turn it back down. Because every piece of music's different. And if the Radnest here is going to be using my stuff, I don't want her to plug or him to plug in, and it's screaming loud, so I just zero it out. And I ask him, when you're done, zero it out. It's just a good practice. It's like putting your tools back in your toolbox. Oh, there's another analogy. Oh. Mike, did you have another question?
Well, you said,
Hang on.
you have 4 minutes to go, you have 19 minutes to go, I think.
Well, here, catch.
No, you guys are doing really good, you stay with us. That's what I wanted to say.
Shoot, you made me
You
walk
got
around.
another 19 minutes.
No, we don't.
So Dick Otis from Reston, Virginia. If you go to the wonderful YouTube channel Square Dancers and look for Buddy Weaver's playlist, you'll find a 2-hour dissertation on music, which is just outstanding. I highly recommend it, not just to get you to my channel, but if you go there, Buddy did a 2-hour presentation for us at Kesla that is just outstanding and worth the time.
How much is Buddy
Pay him for
A
that?
little add-on to your question about normalization. When music is produced and put together, the engineering software and the engineer should be doing what they call mastering. And mastering is bringing up not just to fill the window, but to, through equalization, bring highs and lows and everything up into the mix so that everything stands out like it should. And Problem being with normalization is you're just kind of bringing the overall volume down. You didn't hurt it. You could raise the volume up by turning it up with the volume down. Or you didn't like squash anything. You just lowered its volume. It's like you just turned it down. That's all normalization does. It attempts to turn them all down to the same level, or bring them up, as the case may be. Sometimes if they're not mastered, it has to increase their volume. But mastering, if it's been mastered, I usually leave it alone.
I'd also want to add one more thing, because to comment too, not only zeroing out your volume, but normalizing your tone controls at the end of every set. You know, bring everything up to 12 o'clock. Your bass is up at 12 and your treble's up at 12 o'clock, because when you put a different piece of music on, it's going to have a different tonality to it. And if it has sharp instruments, and we do actually have a little bit more time. I thought we were overtime. Well, I got a text from my union rep. He said you can go for another 15. So it's a CALLERLAB union again. But anyway, where was I going with this? Yeah, the different tonality and everything. So if you have instruments like saxophone, fiddle, you're going to want to bring that treble 12 o'clock or even maybe 11 o'clock. Bring it down a little bit, but don't let that treble wander up to 1 o'clock. On the scale, because it's going to be a lot more shrill. And especially you have to look at, if I could add on one more nuance to this, is when you're doing music and when you're looking at rhythms and you're listening to tempos, and you need to listen to tempos, and you have a software capability that will allow you to save a file. And when you find that tempo that works, I highly recommend you click save that file, so that the next time you go to open up that piece of music, you don't have it playing at the wrong speed, it's too fast. You found the right tempo, bring it down, save that. And at the same time, you might want to make a little running note here that says, when I play, you know, one of your, whatever song it is, you know, what's that one song with Chaparral? So, the medley, start with a big screaming fiddle. Johnny Gibbons. Yeah, big screaming fiddle. You might want to put a little note there, you know, treble down to, you know, 9 o'clock instead, and then bring your volume down so that when you're starting it out, then you want to bring it back up again. Understand that when you're doing music too, you want to find the tonality, the timbre of the music. Timbre, thank you very much. I couldn't remember. Timbre of the music that doesn't fight the timbre of your voice. If you have a high-pitched voice and you're trying to sing into a saxophone, something we produced on, Ernie actually produced on I many years ago, which was Dream a Little, maybe it was a Kip Garvey thing, Dream a Little Dream of Me. And it had I think it had a sax, or it had a fiddle. Right there at the high part, we had a star shining bright, and if you sang that high note, you were going to fight with that lead instrument. That was a huge mistake. So it must have been Kip Garvey. Kip, if you're listening, I love you. If you're listening. Anyway.
We're going to get a phone call.
We're going to. Kip is calling right now. But bear those things in mind, that you're listening to the music in its entirety. And I don't know about you, but when I'm going down the road, I'll put music on. I think my favorite thing I love to listen to is other callers calling. I love to just let it stream. Maybe it's from a podcast. Maybe it's something that one of the old Sets in Order albums. Just put it on and just let it play, because I'm listening. I'm listening for what they did that I can grab onto and use, and maybe listening for something that I didn't like and I don't want to use it that particular way. I love listening to. Well, recent playlists for me would have been like Ron Libby live at one of his festivals, I think in Tennessee. I thought, beautiful the way he did. I thought, I've never thought about using that song that way. I went and dug that singing call up, and I said, by gosh, I'm just going to use it that way. That's what I would recommend to you, the big picture, taking a big step back away and looking at it. Okay? Your turn.
Not a lot of things. Question back in the back.
No. Vic Cedar, California. We on?
No.
Vic, hello?
Push it up.
Vic Cedar, California.
Yeah.
Got you. So, buddy, I'm wondering about this whole tape baking process. Do you like just stick it in your house up and turn it up to 450 and And then after you take it and you run it through once, right, and then basically that's your only chance to record it, right? And then maybe do you add extra rhythm or do you tweak it somehow to bring it up to
Salt and
speed?
pepper on it helps a little bit. All right, I'm gonna answer on my own microphone. I don't want to use anybody else's microphone, I don't want to use your tools. So tape baking is literally that, and it's like 115 degrees for 4 to 6 hours, flip the tape every 30 minutes.
You have to baste it?
Yes.
You don't baste it, and there's a reason for it. It's because, and this is the way I understand it, that a lot of the original binding that was used in older tapes that would have been pre-1968, that was using whale oil as part of their binding agent. And whale oil, of course, in the 60s, became a no-no. And so then they went to a synthetic binding agent, and that Ampex tapes were notorious for drying up. And when they dry, what the baking does is it reactivates the adhesive. So then when you go to play it, and you can play it multiple, you have a window. So once you bake it, you've got a 24-hour window in which to play that tape. And after the 24-hour window is done, you're going to have to rebake it, doubling your times. So if you baked it 6 hours the first time, you're going to bake it 12 hours the second time, turning it every 30 minutes. So, yeah. And if you miss that window, then your next baking time will be 24 hours, turning it every 30 minutes. So you get the idea that there's a lot of work that goes into a lot of the stuff. That if I tell you that this came off of a studio tape, now you get the idea. There's a lot of work that went into getting that studio tape. And it is a lot of work to sell 2 units. Especially those 99-cent hoedowns. Was my hour worth 50 cents now? So yeah, that would be the whole process of tape baking. And of course then you run into the other side of it. The tapes have to have been stored properly, where I got a batch of tapes came out of Oregon. And they were just covered in mildew. Took me days to clean that by hand and then bake it, just to get a decent play off of it. So if I could just give you my opinion, I think, as I've been at this for a few years, I think the music we have today is the best it's ever been. One thing that I have found to be true for me is, and I'm assuming all of you have worked, maybe working now. I work, you work, right? We work a long day and we have to go and call a dance at night. And I found that sometimes you put the music on and I can't hear the beat. I'm tired, I'm toast. And so if I can grab hold of the speaker stand, that helps me feel it. But I thought, I can't do that every single piece I do. Actually, you've been working out. That's why I started producing music. I wanted to produce stuff that I wanted, that gave me the place to step and feel, so that when I put that piece of music on, I could stand there and not have to fish for the rhythm, because if I don't have to fish for the rhythm, my dancers don't have to fish for the rhythm. And it's, at the end of the day, everything I do it for you. No, everything I do for you, I do for the dancers. I do it for the dancers at the end of the day. Because if they look good and they feel good, they'll stay. They will stay in square dancing forever if they can. If they don't feel like they look good, if they're doing a bunch of this Charlie Chaplin music all night long and it just doesn't feel natural to them, they're gone. They're gone. It's just a matter of time. Let them feel good about themselves and they will stick around and stick it out. Scott, did you have anything else you want to add? I'm going to dismiss everybody then. Unless you, hang on, we have another question. You guys are a little slow on questions now. Here you
Phil Rarick, Montgomery, Illinois. You were talking at the very beginning about having over 200 or how many pieces of music on your laptop. I split my music into playlists of about 50, and I cycle those every 3 months, so that I'm always trying to do something fresh. And new music I get goes in another playlist until I'm good at it. So there's other ways to kind of can organize what you're doing.
Very good idea.
I liked it.
Very good
I
idea.
can tell you personally, I only carry what I would intend to use. Not because of that weight. It's just, there's part of it's the time to drag through there to find. You know, it's one, and then I go, no, I don't want to do that one. Well, if I go buy one a couple of times and say, no, I don't do that one, why do I even carry it?
Yeah, and coming back post-pandemic for me too, one of the things I did when I came back post-pandemic is I started using a tablet for all my music. And so I'm not gonna put 5,000 tunes on here. I just picked out the stuff that makes me sound good and lets people dance. That's the stuff that I choose to put on here. Now, this is the old thing, I dragged it out here. That's got probably 1,000 pieces of music on it. But I can get one charge will last me 2 weeks on this. Versus having to plug this thing in every single time I go to use it. So that's the other side of it, is for me personally, I brought my files down to just what, if I know that no matter what, I'm gonna put this piece of music on and it's gonna make me sound good, and it's gonna make the dancers step to the beat of music and they're gonna feel good. If it's something that I have to work on, like, you know, I listen to this guy's vocals, and I'm like, oh man, if only I could sing like that. Well, maybe I can. Maybe if I bought tight pants, I could sing just like Scott Bennett. The problem is I have to lay on the bed, and I have to squeeze those pants on, and then stand up and try to sing like Scott Bennett. Now, that requires a lot of work. Now, those pieces of music that are for me, are rare, because you're going to have to work with it. And I highly encourage you to find at least one square dance singing call that you have to work on, because that will make you work. And as soon as you get good at it, find another one. Phil, you got a good idea. You keep them all in one file. So you get good at one, boom, move on to the next one and work hard at it. Having said all that, I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for staying awake.